Hello everyone, this is Crota giving you a shoutcasting, a game 2 in a best of 7 series between RiseN and Moonglade. This map is called Farmer's Land, and this is the first time I've ever seen this map, so I thought I would spend a minute or so trying to go over this map. There are 4 spawning locations on this map, and each of the spawning locations opens into a clockwise direction. So even though we have Moonglade spawning at the 1 o'clock position and RiseN spawning over here at what I'll call the 10 o'clock position, and these 2 starting locations are relatively far away from each other. There is one small choke point that leads to a natural expansion, and then a relatively larger choke point here on the low ground. Another key thing to note is at that 3rd high ground expansion, it's a gold mineral expansion. However, it is doubly blocked by rocks. So there are rocks over here on the ramp up, and then rocks once again where the command center, nexus, or hatchery would be placed. Interestingly enough as well, there is also a wider ramp that also has brush here. So if you choose not to try to take down these rocks, you would be able to set up this expansion. However, your opponent would have a very easy time walking up this ramp. Now, if you guys have been looking at the mini-map looks very wide open in the center with one Xel'Naga watchtower. However, that is not the case, as there are a lot of what I will call pens set up on Farmer's Land here, so that you cannot really just run openly and free in the center. You can get a lot of flanking, a lot of force field play may come into the center if this was a cross spawn. Gonna go ahead and start up this game now, and once again, as I said earlier, RiseN spawning over here at the 10 o'clock position as the green Protoss player, meanwhile Moonglade spawning as the purple Zerg player at the 1 o'clock position. So once again, Zerg versus Protoss here on Farmer's Land, and we now naturally see what I believe an Overlord will be setting up over here to try to watch this location. And now we see pretty much a standard opening so far. Not too much to really say beyond these 2 locations. I'm kind of curious as to why, I guess, these critters and creeps are so large on the map that they actually show up, but nothing too out of the ordinary, as we now see an Overlord scouting in the counterclockwise direction. We now see RiseN trying to set up what I believe to be a low ground forge and gateway. So a low ground forge and gateway may be set up, and then there will be perhaps a fast expansion over here on the low ground by RiseN. If RiseN is able to set up a low ground expansion, that will give him a very strong economic advantage. And now we see a drone making its way out in order to do some scouting. This is a relatively large map, I believe, so it will take quite some time for this drone to make its way all the way into these 2 starting locations, and both players scouting in the counterclockwise direction. So we will see this one probe now making its way over here, and will quickly be able to find Moonglade. Moonglade will take a little bit more time, as this Overlord still making its way over into this location here. We do see one drone passing through the center, and this one Xel'Naga watchtower revealing a lot of that center portion of the map, and not quite revealing the choke points over here. This choke point is relatively large, I must admit. So there may be a lot of Zergling play, a lot of force fields may also come into position as well. Also, another thing to notice is that because of these critters over here on the high ground, it is actually a little bit more difficult to guard your expansion than you would normally think, especially for range units. Siege tanks and Colossi will not be able to guard this relatively narrow choke point. Back over here, we now see a drone making its way over here. Perhaps we'll come into this position in just a moment as the Overlord able to gain sight. We see RiseN now with this pylon and a nexus over here on the low ground, and now warping in a forge. So RiseN getting a forge on this low ground. We'll be able to set up a cannon and a gateway in just a moment. Back in the base of Moonglade nearing completion on this hatchery, and also getting the spawning pool. So the spawning pool will obviously allow for some Zergling production. I do not see any extractors just quite yet. So Moonglade, I believe he doesn't want to get extractors right now, because if he focuses too much on gas on the early portion of the game, he will end up falling behind if he does need to try to get more and more spine crawlers and needs more minerals there. We do see one drone patrolling right in this location, trying to make sure that no pylons are being placed there, and RiseN may try to set up a pylon. No, not going to set up a pylon, even though the forge is already down. The gateway also placed down as well. Will we see a pylon come into play? It does not look like it, as that hatchery now training up that queen. The queen would have been able to take down that hatchery relatively easily. Moonglade now just outside this front door, able to see this one photon cannon, and as it was being warped in, I believe, and now this gateway and this forge on this front door. One of the interesting things I would like to see coming in from Moonglade is, will Moonglade try to abuse these high ground or these rocks over here? This would make this choke point much more open, as any units that try to move out here may get flanked from this high ground position and the naturally very wide open expanse right here. Taking a look at the income tab, we have 25 harvesters for RiseN and also 25 harvesters for Moonglade. Moonglade getting more minerals just because he is currently not mining any gas so far. Moonglade finally getting one extractor up, and it will be quite some time before we see any tier 2. Drones already making their way into that one extractor, and there we go, trying to harvest some additional gas. We do have one zealot holding this position here, and I believe I like the positioning on RiseN's forge and the zealot. Even if there was, I believe, one roach here, the roach would not be able to attack the zealot without getting hit at least by that photon cannon, acting a little bit of a double protection there. Also, the zealot more trying to protect against any zergling run-bys that would be able to just wreak havoc on the economic portion of this game. We now see Moonglade getting a lot of drones and also getting that roach warren, so it does not look like he's trying to go too fast into tier 2. Just doing a slow and steady game so far, and so far we see that the creep is now slowly killing all of these trees, but still leaving all of these these sheeps and cows and cows and dogs. No cows, just what is that, a dog, a sheep, getting distracted by the doodads. A couple of Zerglings now waiting off on this front door, making sure that there are no zealots. A sentry also joining in as well. An early sentry, very important in a Protoss versus Zerg matchup, as you want to be able to get a lot of force fields early on, making sure that you do not get flanked by Zerglings and you can push back roaches. Before, roaches had a much more difficult time trying to deal with force fields, as the diameter of a force field was, I believe, 2.9 and the roach range was 3. So if a zealot was not pressed up straight against a force field, the roach would not be able to deal any serious damage there. We also see a pylon being placed down over here by RiseN, and I really like this pylon placement. What this will allow RiseN to do is he will be able to warp in units onto this low ground without having to walk outside this base. This game is relatively slow so far, as both players just playing a massive game of Sim StarCraft. However, Moonglade focusing a lot of energy on this creep highway. So this queen now with a lot of creep tumors, I believe there are now 4 creep tumors being pushed out very quickly across this map, will be able to generate creep very quickly, as this queen once again going to just continue to drop down more and more creep tumors. So I believe this will open up into a lot of Hydralisk play. Moonglade also is taking these rocks out and will be able to take this high ground gold natural expansion. I believe the spawning locations here will be giving Glade a stronger advantage, just because the natural expansion or the third base for RiseN will be much more difficult for him to expand into, just because of this ramp that naturally opens off into this already very fast, quickly developing creep highway. There are some Zerglings over here. The Zerglings, however, are not trying to take down any of these destructible rocks just quite yet. We now see an army of stalkers and sentries. Army-wise, we see a 2,000 mineral army for Moonglade. Meanwhile, RiseN sitting at 1150. There is one observer now making its way across the map, able to see a lot of this base so far. Moonglade did lose one overlord that was parked outside RiseN's base, and now Moonglade knows exactly how strong his army is compared to his opponent. You see Moonglade getting a lot of creep tumors still, and now getting the movement upgrade for those roaches. So those roaches will be able to move with a movement speed of almost 4. So that is going to be very fast, and it will be very difficult for those zealots and those stalkers to try to catch up with those roaches on that creep. Even though the roaches will have a much slower movement speed, they would be able to push out very quickly on this creep, as Moonglade just taking this time to spread creep all across the map, and you can see the amount of sight that Moonglade currently has. One of the things that I'm curious about is that RiseN does not have, and RiseN so far, even though he's been safe inside his base, he has the smaller army. So RiseN will soon find himself on the receiving end of a very big beatdown unless he's very careful. We need to see some Colossi and some other production units as well. So far, this is just going to be a massive Zergling Roach army. You can take a look at his hatcheries. His hatcheries still getting a lot of larva production, keeping on top of that spawn larva ability. He will all of a sudden be able to create a lot of roaches in just a moment. Currently sitting on 12 larva, and the only thing that's currently slowing him down is that he's currently supply locked or near supply locked at 132 over 134. We see some changelings now making their way out. An overseer also making its way in. Will be able to get some quick sight into this base, and as soon as he sees there are a lot of immortals, he may not decide to push out, as those roaches will fall quickly to those immortals. However, there are some Zerglings, and that Zergling with that metabolic boost will be able to surround some of those units very, very quickly. Stalkers now making their way out, and now a pylon being placed down as well. So RiseN trying to make something happen here with a pylon. Obviously will be able to warp in a lot of units in just a moment. Zealots also being warped in back over here, trying to stay up on top of that macro, and now getting the level 2 weapons upgrade. So the level 2 weapons upgrade will allow for a stronger attack from those immortals, sentries, stalkers, and zealots. This should be a very, very interesting push in just a moment now, as army wise we see that RiseN and Moonglade are about even. We also see one observer in the air by RiseN, very, very smart, as he wants to clean up a lot of this creep highway. We also see a large group of roaches. These roaches may try to engage here. We do not see any force fields just quite yet. Force fields now coming in. Zerglings now trying to come in as well. However, those force fields were just a little bit late and not able to stop Moonglade's roaches. Roaches now trying to scamper around. Zealots also attacking very, very slowly, and now RiseN's army simply getting surrounded here. Those force fields coming a day late and $1 short, and this RiseN's army will just simply get torn apart by the acid saliva of these roaches. Roaches do not even have the attack upgrades, however are able to take down and deal so much damage towards this army. Additional immortals trying to come in and trying to join in on this fight. Roaches now making their way forward. More zealots on stalkers trying to engage as well. This immortal needs to pull back. Will it be in time? No, not in time, as Moonglade's roach army just able to simply swarm and take out RiseN's army here. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. I hope you guys enjoyed Game 2 in this Best of 7 series between RiseN and Moonglade here on Farmers Land.